as our Bible. But we did want to find out, again, what Thoreau would have done and how he would have done it. So that's our research question of sorts. Now, we didn't go about this the general way undergrad research might. We had a replica to build from, perhaps a previous work that reflected something that we wanted to achieve, but this replica is just a replica. It's not the original work. All we know about Thoreau's house is that it was 10 by 15 footprint. It had 8-foot posts. Now, when you ask, would Thoreau would have done this in a college classroom, when he talked to college students, he didn't say that they should use their hands instead of their heads, but he did say that students should not play life or study it merely, but earnestly live it from beginning to end. And so this is our attempts to follow that. And when we started this project, we thought it'd be easy. Thoreau only mentions the construction of his house a couple of times in Walden, and mostly refers to the economy, how much the materials cost that he borrowed and asked, but the actual detail of how he put it up was not mentioned. And so when we took it, we thought that this would be simple. Walden, Thoreau could have done it and only wrote about it for a little bit of time. He was one guy by himself, and we could do it with a class. But we learned rather quickly that that was not the case. And one of the issues that we face is we're living in a world that Thoreau did not live in. So he went out to Walden Pond, he found his site, he dropped his trees, knowing some construction background. We know that he had some experience building his family house and helping with Emerson's house. We don't have that experience. We have experience with computers. Thoreau also used white pine. He used green white pine, which means it's fresh wood. It warps. We will find that out when we put up the timber frame, and it won't be square. But we don't even get the luxury of using white pine. We're using yellow pine, which is almost twice as dense. Now, when we talk about this, we're mentioning the materiality of it all. So we don't have the chemicals that you have to buy to get the precursor RNA, but we also don't have the 2x4s and the plywood. We're using actually trees, as Drew emphasized, and we're trying to figure out how best to use these materials and what it would be like. And in terms of the tools that we're using, we don't have a day-night machine, we don't have an apple butter paddle, but we do have the ads and the broad ads, as mentioned. So we're taking all of this, and we have a steep learning curve with it. And what we figured out is these man hours accumulate. Thoreau probably did this in a reasonable amount of time. We've been working on an entire semester. He may have been able to square his timbers as nicely as this. We have not. But as we go through this squaring timbers and learning the tools, that's one thing. But what did he actually build? What were his plans, and what was the structure that he built? And so when we looked into this, we had to look back at historic American timber framing from the 19th century. We were familiar with the tools. We had Beeler tell us how to work wood in these old ways, but there is no definitive plan on how Thoreau built his house. And even if you look at the replica plans that are provided in Concord, those plans seem a little sketchy. Croft and myself have looked over it. They don't seem right. Now, being good engineers, we referred to the math that is timber framing, but we didn't, because we're not going to go through this, especially in an LCC course, and we know that Thoreau wouldn't have. He would have had some tacit knowledge, some rule of thumb that he knew when he was building these joints and knowing the stresses and the strains of the material he worked with. We also know that Thoreau would not have used Google SketchUp, but we did, because it's convenient, and when we were coming up with these plans, we tried to figure out what joints would work. We'd like dovetails on the tie beams and the girders to help against tension and compression. When we were looking at the roof system and the rafter system, we looked at examples in the past. We had the purlins to help prevent from racking. The joint up top, the half lap, is simple, but what we're still having problems with are these joints down here on the rafters, getting it back to the frame. And I found out after talking to a friend about my stitches from the ads that she and her dad do timber framing. Her dad's a timber framer man. She took a look at these plans. She took a look at the corner joints at the rafter system, and she laughed a little bit, thinking that we were crazy and that this is not the way to do these joints. So while these joints look pretty in SketchUp, we'll probably learn rather quickly that they do not work, and they may not work. So we also have brace joints, and these are nice looking, Thoreau didn't make this complicated joint. I can guarantee you, and we probably won't make it because it probably won't hold and we don't have that accuracy. But what Thoreau did say in Walden, in one of the chapters, is he mentioned that this frame so slightly clad was a sort of crystallization around me and reacted on the builder. And so while we have this frame, this great idea, the 10 by 15 footprint, the 8-foot post, you know, this frame that we're building isn't meant to hold the snow and the load of that during winter. It's not meant to live in. We're using it as a learning tool. And so as we go through this project, this crystallization around us, we realize that maybe it's not what Thoreau would have done, but it is our project, it is our own, and we are learning through it. It just might not be as accurate as we had hoped. So while the plans we've seen might have not been accurate, our project isn't accurate either to a certain extent. You know, our site isn't that of Walden, it's outside of architecture where the Solar Decathlon House used to be. There's a construction site opposite, but in this experiment of living, we're having an experiment of learning and trying to figure out